Chelsea, welcome. Where are you tuning in from?
I'm in Long Island, New York.
Long Island, Strong Island.
Yeah.
Well, we are so thrilled that you're here. Let's dive right into it. You started your career door knocking.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what that experience led you to believe and learn, what that was like, and how it transitioned into where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in door-to-door sales for alarms with ADT back in 2004. I was in college and I just needed money. And somebody introduced me to the company and said we could sell alarm systems to houses and you can make $150 to $300 a sale. And I'm like, I'm in. Back then, that was a lot of money. And door knocking was a great way to get introduced to sales. I think it's one of the hardest things to do. Having an actual door slammed in your face definitely prepares you for what you are going to feel and see in the future. It's just, it's not like getting hung up on the phone. It's different. You're in person and someone's actually shutting a door in your face. So I think it's good. Toughens you up.
One of the things I look for when I'm hiring SDRs for my clients is I love door-to-door sellers because compared to getting a door slammed in your face, maybe 200 to 300 times a week, getting a phone call hung up and disconnected is a lot less painful. And I feel like it builds a certain kind of resilience that you cannot really get anywhere else. How, how
Yeah.
did how did that experience help you develop, your sales tenacity? Were there any moments where you were like, oh, this is it's kind of working, it's not so bad? Tell us a little bit about, what kind of adversity you faced when you were doing that.
Yeah, well, I would say at first I was very nervous. I was only 18. And back then we didn't even have a cell phone. So I would go knock on a door. I'd have this little alarm sign in my hand and I'd be like, hi, I'm Chelsea. There's been a robbery in your neighborhood and they sent me out here to see if you have an interest in getting an alarm or do you have an alarm system? And people were thrown off because I looked so young. I think they thought I was selling them Girl Scout cookies or something, like when they first saw my face. And then they would be like, "What? Like an alarm system? Like what is happening?"
Yeah.
And it was a little awkward because I would go into I by the way would never let my own daughters do this. I just need to say it. I would go in some stranger's house by myself without a cell phone, and then I'd have to go in, show them the alarm system book or like whatever I had on me, call my manager who did have a cell phone, and if they were interested, have them come and also call from their house phone to the back office and get them to run their social security number for their credit. So the whole thing was very invasive and uncomfortable, right? You can't get more uncomfortable than that. Like I'm in a stranger's house, I have to ask them for their social security number. It was weird. Um, but good weird because then when I went into, I graduated, I went into financial sales. I was like, this is easy. Like this isn't as strange. I'm in an office. I'm not in someone's house.
And so you went from door to door into finance. What were you doing in that financial sales role?
Yeah, so I started out in like I was getting my CFP and I was tutoring other people in their CFP, so I thought I was going to be a wealth manager. And then I decided I didn't want to do that and I went into lending. So I was doing loans in Manhattan. I worked for JP Morgan Chase. I had a bunch of branches under me and I was responsible for lending at those branches. And that was fun, fun for a while.
So you went from door knocking to lending, and then you got into real estate a bit.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, there was a lot of in between, right? So I was doing door knocking. In college, I was a sales manager of a fitness center. I was doing experiential marketing and I was promo model. And then I owned a company my first company was actually in college. I started a cleaning company. So I was doing all these things, right? I just wanted money. And then when I graduated, yeah, I got into finance, but I graduated in '08 when the market crashed. So my ideas of going into investment banking, like I had connections, everything fell through, and I just needed a job. So I had to take what I could get, and it kind of just snowballed, and that's where I ended up in banking and lending.
And I can imagine that was like the worst time to get into finance
Yeah.
with the '08 crash. But that, isn't the end of your journey. From there, you had some interesting turns. How did you end up getting to where you are today, where now you run a community, you're teaching people how to social sell? what was the transition from '08 up until today that got you to this point?
Yeah, it's so interesting looking back because everything kind of compounds on each other. And the sales background was really important. And honestly, like when you're in corporate, you get great sales training, right? And then I was owning my businesses. So I was getting great training and owning my own businesses. I became a consultant around like 2010. I was doing that. So all these experiences combined led me to where I am today. But I'd say for like the focus on LinkedIn and social selling piece, I started selling on LinkedIn in 2010. Back to that reason of in 2010, I still looked really young. And when I was canvassing and I was trying to get in front of people, I wasn't being taken seriously. So I turned to LinkedIn to try to develop relationships, and it worked. I developed deep relationships with attorneys, title people, real estate agents, and that mainly was from LinkedIn. And then in like, as time went on, I had different roles. I kept turning to LinkedIn for sales and realizing how well it worked. And then in 2017, when I got into a whole new career, I really went hard on LinkedIn. And that's how I scaled a company and like helped this agency grow and started teaching people back in 2017 about LinkedIn because I was like, wow, this one thing like really, really works.
And in a lot of ways that definitely hasn't changed. LinkedIn has become a much stronger place to go to meet your buyers. And
Hmm.
I'm sure a lot of people on here use LinkedIn all the time, but hopefully before we finish up today, they'll have some strategies for how they can better utilize LinkedIn. But before we get there, you posted something that was, I thought, really interesting on LinkedIn, and it went, got a lot of attention. You wrote, ladies, you've been lied to. Everyone says put your career first. Why
Hmm.
is that a lie?
I love this. So I'm a mom, right? Like I'm a mother, and I'm of an age now where I've had a lot of friends who put their career first. And now they don't have the opportunity to have children, even though that's something that they really wanted. And the point in that post was to communicate to younger girls that they can do both, right? Like they can pursue their career, but if in their heart they truly want to have a family and have children, that they need to prioritize first finding a high value partner to have children with. So my perspective is like do it like you'd be searching for a job. Whip out an Excel sheet if you have to. Go on all the apps, date a bunch of guys, like figure out the mean average of what you're looking for and find something better than that and pick a man. Like like do what it takes to find a high value man and be intentional and date with purpose when you're in your 20s, when you're young, and then, have your children. Don't think that this career and the success and the money is going to bring you that deep joy and happiness because it typically won't.
I mean, that's such a powerful reflection. I think you called it the Sex and the City lie, which I really
Yeah.
liked how you coined that. But I'm a new dad. I've got 3 kids, 5 and under. So it's a very rowdy household. But meanwhile, I've been trying to also start a business. There's a huge difference in pre-kids, post-kids
Mhm.
in terms of my motivation now, my responsibilities, my focus. It's a lot different. And I can relate to something you're saying, which is, the before and after. We talked about this a little bit before the show, which was like before it was all about the my ego, the prestige, like the title, the pay. But after I was put in this position where it's like, no, this isn't nearly as important as setting my kids up for their future, having security and actually being around in their lives. And what I really appreciated about our conversation earlier was you were reflecting on something very similar, how that changed your motivation.
Mhm.
And that kind of led you to coming back into the market with some time off. When you came back after you took some time, what did you notice about trying to reintegrate back in to the workforce?
Yeah, that's great. So just to create clarity for anyone that's listening, I left corporate in 2014 with the birth of my first daughter. And I did not work for about like 2.5 years. I was running a small company that I used to own, helping run it, but I didn't have like a full-time job. My full focus was on being a mom. And then when I returned in 2017, it was really challenging because I could not find a job. Um, and I needed to. So I had find myself, I was in a relationship with her dad and it wasn't working. In 2017, I was pregnant with my second child and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to do this on my own. I gotta get back to work. And I could not find a job. Nobody would hire me. There was a lot of discrimination. When I would go, they would say, well, what have you been doing? And I'm like, raising a whole other human. Just been doing that. They would ask me questions like, well, who's watching your child now? Like they almost as if like I couldn't get her in daycare or something, it was very odd. So it was just weird going back into the workforce. I took a role with a literal less than a third of the pay I was making originally because I just needed to get out of the situation I was in. And I felt almost as if I was starting over. And that's actually when I did turn to LinkedIn because I was in a completely new industry. I got a role at an ad agency. I didn't know anyone within their target audience, their ICP, which was national nonprofits. I didn't know literally anything about advertising. Like I was just like lost. The one thing I knew how to do though was sell, and I knew LinkedIn can help me do it, and that's where I started.
I think that's such a powerful motivator. Your back was up against the wall. You had to figure out how to do it. And
Hmm.
you're right back in LinkedIn, something that was working for you a long time before and continued to work for you then. And it sounds like, I mean, if that's your origin story, sort of like the hero, every hero has their beginning. That
Yeah.
kind of sounds like the beginning of how you got to where you are today. And so now you're at this point where you're able to take all this experience of what you've learned through doing it yourself on LinkedIn, and now you teach other people about
Hmm.
it. Um, Tell us a little bit about, what, why it's important to learn to sell on LinkedIn, and why specifically you. Like, what have you learned that you now teach to the people who come to you to learn about it? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I've seen, over the years how much LinkedIn has changed and I've evolved my approach and I've evolved how I sell too, right? Because the buyers have changed and we'll dive into that. But yeah, LinkedIn is very important. It actually is the foundation of a proper sales strategy these days. Now, I'm not against cold calling. I'm not against cold email. I think that you have to have all of these things working together, but LinkedIn really is the foundation for building a pipeline and a brand.
So this is where I think it's so interesting because I see um, lots of business owners or CEOs or co-founders trying this, and
Mm-hmm.
then they get started, they start posting, and not a lot of success, and they say it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with that approach?
Well, that's one. Okay. So we have to break up LinkedIn a little bit. LinkedIn, there's sales and then there's marketing. These are two separate things. I can tell you right now, I've been selling on LinkedIn since 2010, right? And teaching people how to sell since 2017. I am an absolute expert at sales and building a pipeline through LinkedIn and integrating that into your sales system. But I didn't conquer this content piece until a couple years ago. I
Mm.
was throwing spaghetti at the wall with my own content. I didn't even realize how important content was in the buyer's journey until a few years ago. I'm like a walking warning sign and a PSA because, like, I should be like I don't know, I should be a lot more famous on LinkedIn than I am, but I'm not. You know why? Because I didn't post properly and I didn't post for very long. Like it takes time. So I always say, like, don't be like me. Like, let's start there. But the thing with sales is that is outreach, and that's something that the sales team should be doing, that one-to-one outreach, right? Trying to position a founder as a thought leader, that's marketing. And that's a
Mm.
different skill set. And it's one I had to learn and I had to pay to learn. And I had a lot of failures learning. So we definitely need to make sure those two things are different in people's minds because they're not the same.
I love that distinction because everyone here is probably thinking about it. At least I was for a while, where it's like, okay, but if I'm just posting stuff, how's that going to lead to sales? I get that
Hmm.
eventually it could, but what you're saying is there's actually a more strategic way, and this is what you've been primarily using LinkedIn for a much longer time, which is a more strategic, direct sales approach. What does that look like? Are you reaching out to people and pitch slapping them?
I used to. I'm gonna admit it. Like I was just like, meet with me. Um, so yes, In 2017, I'll tell you what the approach was. It was going into Sales Navigator, developing a saved search based on the ICP, scraping it out with tools, getting an Excel sheet, sending actual connection requests, not through automation, and then when they accepted, sending them a message, doing a phone call, and then doing an email. Now I had a team under me, so they could do this, and then over time I was able to kind of automate certain elements. But yeah, like it hasn't changed that much, guys. Like you still need to scrape the leads out of LinkedIn, use AI for the connection request. Once a tool like Dripify is in there and sending out the automation, I mean, the automated connection request, you turn it off. When someone accepts, you send them a message and you just spark a conversation. You pre-qualify in the DMs because you don't want to waste your time or theirs on a call and you want to increase your win rates anyway. So you go in the DMs, you pre-qualify people. If it's a good fit, then you send them the meeting link. But yeah, like back in the day, I tried it all. Once I learned automation, like I learned Lemlist and some other tools, I went crazy. I was like, just like series of messages, Calendly link everywhere. It was kind of embarrassing. And I even advised my clients to do it for a bit, and that sucks. But back then it worked because people weren't doing it, right? I got in with the
Mm.
AI and automation early, but then once everyone else started doing it, I'm like, we have to stop because now it's saturated. Like we rode the train while we could, and now it ended.
I think that's a common trend for all things, whether it's cold calling,
Yeah.
cold email, any kind of like pipeline generation channel. There's always going to be the trend that works until it stops working because everyone's doing it, and then it becomes the spam signal that our prospects hate. As soon as they see
Correct.
it, they are immediately repulsed, turned off. They don't want it anymore. I can tell you, if I open up my DM, uh, I aggressively move people over to my other or whatever it is to get them out of my inbox. But one of the things that is so common, and this is why on LinkedIn, I have my first name and first initial. So it's Ronen R, because I want to see who's using automation as a way to immediately default. I'm not going to respond to this person when they say, hi, Ronen R period. Really great to meet you. I could tell they're using some sort of first name automation in there. However, on the flip side, and this is true for cold calling, email, any kind of cold outreach, the people who are starting with some sort of conversation starter, something that allows the spark to begin, there to be some sort of
Mhm.
engagement. It's not salesy. It's really just an initial connection that eventually might lead to some sort of like, hey, have you ever considered this? Like an open-ended question. Those are the ones that actually capture my attention and allow me to move through. And on the flip side, that's what I used to do as well. Back when I was chief growth officer at a company called Stylo, I helped land our largest customer through one of these LinkedIn DM strategies. I
Mhm.
simply reached out to someone who I saw engaging with a post of an influencer. And I commented in my connection request. I said, hey, I saw you like Nick Meta's post, but I'm curious about your opinion. Is he right? And started a conversation. And through that conversation, I was able to get it to a point where I said, it's kind of funny. This is sort of what we do at Stylo using AI. Would you ever want to take a look? She dropped her calendar link, and that was a six-figure deal a few months later.
Yeah, that's literally what I teach. And by the way, I do need to say something. So I am on to tricksters like you in my program. What I teach people to do is scrape the leads out of Sales Nav and scrub all through
Clean
the
them up,
first
scrub
names
them.
and
Yeah.
clean them up. So you would never, I would say, okay, Ronan, he needs to be it's Ronan, right? That's how you say it? I'm so
Ronan.
bad at, yeah,
Yeah.
Ronan, sorry. Ronan. And like I would delete that R. If someone's name is Jonathan, I have him say John or Michael, Mike. Like I go that granular because you're not trying to trigger in someone's head that this is spam or AI or automation. And then the connection request is super simple, like one sentence just to get them to accept. And then we're doing the same thing, right? Like commenting on all the posts on the business pages, observing something, using that observation to start the conversation. And then also being patient. Like you might have a conversation with someone on LinkedIn that could take 3 or 4, 6 weeks. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
not a cold call, guys. Like, this is just whenever someone has time to respond to you, and you have to be easy with it. And like, I have tons of conversations going on right now. Like, it's all good. Like, it'll work itself out. But that's hard, very hard for people to understand because they want 10 meetings a week, and that is how the reps are measured on success. And even if those are shitty meetings, they don't care. They want that 10, right? And when you do this approach with LinkedIn social selling, that's out the window. But then you close 6, 7-figure deals, which you and I both have. So, but people don't get that mentally.
And I think that's a really great point, because the difference in cold calling is it's all real time. But
Mm-hmm.
with any asynchronous approach, email, DMs, you've got to be patient, because who knows if you're ever going to hear back. But then there's also the question around, how often do you follow up? How how many times? How frequently in between? Do you give it some space? What kind of things are you saying in the follow up? I could tell you in my experience, for sure with email, usually it's like one, maybe two, and then you're going to move on to maybe a new thread or something, because at a certain point, if someone's not going to respond to even the follow up, you've probably lost them somewhere along the way. The difference with LinkedIn is you can do a little snooping. You can see if someone's been active by
Yeah.
checking out their activity, and see if this person's even been online since your last message, because maybe they liked a post or they commented on a post, or they now you can't see if they don't drop any activities, if they don't do any, they're not engaging with other, creators or people on LinkedIn, you won't know. But you don't have that with email. And the other
Right.
thing that you have on LinkedIn that's very unique is, as of now, there isn't a spam filter, not nearly as aggressive as email.
No.
How do
No.
you guide your students through, what do I do in my connect request? Do I leave a message or not? Do I keep it blank? Do I say something? Does it have to be personalized? From there, what's the process of taking them through to be able to get to that point where we can finally have a sales conversation?
Yeah, so let me make this really practical for you. I'll tell you what I do. How about we start there? So when someone views my profile and I scrape that list out, I'll say something as simple as like, "Hey, nice to meet you. I saw you viewed my profile. Just wanted to connect here so we could chat in the DMs." And that's it. And that's the connection request. And then there's, if they're within my ICP, you better believe like I'm looking at their profile, I'm commenting on any posts. If I really want to get in front of them, let's say I message them, they don't respond, and I want to get in front of them, I'll go see if they commented on someone else's post, and then I'll drop a comment under their comment, right? Like whatever it takes, but you have to get strategic. And yeah, there's plenty of opportunity to do that on LinkedIn. But I'm not the one who's going to send 3 or 4 messages that go unanswered. I don't need to. And even when I needed to, I didn't really. Because it's just not the way you build a relationship. Like it's like if you were dating some creepy guy, or if like, someone keeps hitting you up on Instagram and I open it and there's like 4 DMs. They're like, "Are you there?" It's like, "No, leave me alone." You don't want to give that energy like in the
The
LinkedIn
neediness.
DMs. Yeah. So, but I can go comment on a post, I can, that's not icky. It's not icky to engage. It's not icky to also create content. So that's where the content comes in, because we should talk about this. Your content is the biggest thing for you today.
Hmm.
And that's not what I understood. I did not understand this for years. I was commenting on posts, doing the outreach, all the things, but the thing I was lacking for myself and my clients was the content. Because if I'm connected with you on LinkedIn and you're somewhat active and I send you a message, right, or I comment under a post that you're commenting on, or I'm commenting on your stuff, LinkedIn might serve my content to you. So now I'm in front of you. I have an opportunity to get in front of you. And before I was creating content, I didn't have that opportunity, right? Like I was kind of relying on the inbox and the commenting only. The content opens up a whole new world.
So
Um,
Chelsea, when
yeah.
when did you have that realization, when you were like, I have to add this into my world? And what does this having good content do for you?
So even going backwards, right? I realized that the way people buy today is different than they used to buy. And I didn't, it wasn't like an immediate light bulb. It was kind of over time where I was realizing how important it was. But I was realizing that even how my buyer journey looked, right? Like if I get a cold email, what did I do? Well, I would go to the person's LinkedIn profile. So if John Smith from XYZ company emailed me and I was even slightly interested, the first thing I would do would go to his LinkedIn profile. I'm like, who's John Smith? And then I'd look at his profile and then I'd say, okay, what is XYZ company? Then I'd go look at that. and then maybe the website, but usually not. If I liked what I saw, I would go and book a call. So I realized that in my own buyer journey. And then I realized, let me like talk to other people. Are they doing this? And then I just started asking people, and they were like, yeah, like that's what they do too. So I was like, whoa, well that's something, because me and my clients don't have a ton of content on the profile page. Yes, the profile was optimized. That's always something I recommended, but the content really wasn't a big part of what I was doing, training and offering. So I started getting more into that. And then I would say like in 2022, creating content, 2023, creating content, throwing tons of money at the problem. I mean, I hired agencies for tens of thousands of dollars to come help me, but they didn't even have brands themselves, so they couldn't help me. And I just pissed money away. And then I hired this girl, Beatrice Lado, who is amazing. And she taught me exactly how to write for the LinkedIn
Mm.
algorithm, how to create content for LinkedIn. And I give her all the praise because she's this young, ambitious woman who knows LinkedIn. She taught me more than any of these fancy agencies ever taught me. And that's really when I like got plugged in about like fall of 2023 on how content works.
That's incredible because I have a very similar experience. You sometimes you find someone great and just stick with them. But
Yeah.
putting it back together to for the audience to be able to understand the way it works is your buyer might see something, a DM from you, and if they have any level of interest and curiosity in what you're saying, the first thing they're doing is clicking your profile to go check out what you have on LinkedIn. So you need to think of your profile as a mini landing page, an
Hmm.
advertisement. What do you want them to see? Including probably your banner, your about section, maybe some sort of link out to some sort of call to action there. And similar to you, Chelsea, I do the same thing. Like if I'm curious about what someone messaged me, I go to their LinkedIn. And then if I'm still curious, I click on the company profile, I
Hmm.
look at the company, and then I click on the website. And that's just a series of research. I'm just trying to learn more because my curiosity continues to elevate and rise. But the key in the initial part of it is the strategy is who you're reaching out to. If you're reaching out to a tier one top ideal customer profile, the right account, the right prospect, you know
Hmm.
for good reason that they'll have the kind of challenge that you solve. That is the strategy. Because if you're reaching out to people who aren't a fit, the message won't resonate as much. And when they see your profile, they won't be curious to keep going. And
Right.
when they see your company website, they won't be curious to learn more. On the flip side, knowing who you're targeting is such a crucial first step, but having a place for them to land, that sounds like it's a huge value add. And it's a passive way to have people learn more about what it is you want them to know, which
Yeah.
brings me to something that you said earlier, which is, sales and marketing are no longer silos. In some ways that
Hmm.
they're all in one. That that takes us into like what are your 5 C's, and how do you use that as a guide to help your clients learn to better use LinkedIn to generate the pipeline that they're capable of generating?
So, my 5 C's are a method, a framework I've created to help people leverage LinkedIn fully into their sales system and marketing systems. You want me to go over like each one? I can.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get into the 5 C's at a high level. And I'm sure this is where some people will have maybe some questions. If you
Yes,
have questions for Chelsea, feel free to use the Q&A section to type them in, and we'll save some time at the end to get to them.
perfect. Yeah. And one thing I did want to say too was, because it's funny, statistically speaking, 50% of B2B web traffic actually comes from LinkedIn. So,
Wow.
the way that we are doing this, other people are doing it as well. Like there's stats to back it up. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so let's get into it. So I have the 5 C's framework for social selling on LinkedIn. This is what I teach my clients. My clients are typically in the B2B space. These are medium-sized businesses. They have revenues typically over $5 million a year. Um, Sales teams that range in size. It could be like 5, it could be 20, it could be 30 people. It doesn't matter, but I teach this to sales teams. Now with saying that, I also teach this to individuals inside my community on school, because I wanted to give people, like, I never had a program for individuals. I only had a program to help businesses. So I opened this school community and I was like, let me just teach my LinkedIn accelerator program inside there, and I'll teach these 5 C's. So the first one is curating the list. So that's going into Sales Navigator, understanding how to properly pull a saved search. So a lot of people know how to pull a saved search on LinkedIn, but what I realize is their criteria is wrong. If you have a business, you have to look at your current book and who your clients are, and you need to research first how your clients are coded on LinkedIn by industry, employee size. You have to look at your the titles of the people you work with, so not just the decision makers on the deal, but the day-to-day people. Because I can't even tell you how many times in the past, and this is years ago, me and my team would go to build a list for someone, and then the people would be like, "Oh, these people aren't a good fit," and we're like, "Well, you told us you only wanted the chief marketing officer and you wanted
Yep.
software development companies. Go to find out their companies are listed as like information technology, business consulting. They're actually working with someone who has a different title for 90% of their book. So you have to look at those things before you go and build your list. I can't stress that enough. But once you build the list, we teach you, and I teach you how to scrape using tools like Ava Boot, Phantom Buster, because you got to get it out of the system so you could scrub it really good. You want to make sure every person is perfect on that list. And that's again where people get lazy. You know, when they do this
Mm.
outreach, like they don't want to look at the list. It's thousands of people. They're like, I'll just throw it in there. And then they're not happy with who they connect with. So it's really important step. Um, and that's part of like that curation of the list. That's the first C. The second one is content. Pretty self-explanatory. You need content, but you need to learn how to write content that's optimized for the algorithm. You need to know what works on here. This is not something most people who are experts at marketing even know, okay? They don't know it. So you might have a CMO on your team and think you have this covered. I promise you, if you're not getting engagement and leads, you do not have it covered. So content is huge. Also, optimization of the profile, everything you were saying before, super important. And then we go to commenting. Commenting is the biggest opportunity that is missed on LinkedIn. People are not engaging with their prospects' posts. They are not engaging with the businesses that they're trying to go after. They're just not using commenting and community engagement as part of their strategy for sales. So
So
that's a big
Chelsea,
one.
when you
Yeah.
suggest commenting on your buyers' posts, um, I've seen this go down a few ways. I've seen it go down where someone is like straight up just pitching in the comments.
No.
I've seen it where someone is uh just dropping the like, thanks for that, really awesome, and like there's nothing really. What like next level of feedback or advice would you give someone who wants to go engage with their buyers' posts and content? Is there any guiding principle you have for what makes for good comments?
Well, I think what even further back from that, what makes for a good approach in general is being detached. You can't go in there with this ulterior motive of, oh, I just want to get a deal closed. That's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to get a conversation started to pre-qualify them. That's it. That's all you're doing. So, okay, now how do we comment? Well, comment as if you were speaking to them. Don't overcomplicate it. Like I always say, it's like you were talking to somebody you just met on the train. Don't make it weird. You don't need to like have your ego in there and prove a point. You're not smart. Just comment. Like, like honestly, I have clients who use people to do their commenting for them, and they're like 19-year-old college kids, and they do a great job.
That's
You
awesome.
don't need to comment as if you're the subject matter expert.
Mm.
People will be so grateful to get a comment under their post. I promise you, most people are not getting a ton of comments. So if you write anything and you give them any attention, they're going to really appreciate that.
Well, on top of that too, there's a second layer, which is if you keep showing up, if your buyer is regularly posting more than once a week or once a week at least, and they see your name over and over and over on their posts, they will start to associate you as someone they like. Because
Yeah.
just like Chelsea said, it's actually really hard to get engagement if you're consistently the one giving them engagement on their posts. And then after a few of those, you reach out in the DMs, you're way more likely to hear back from them.
Yeah, and you can't be like thinking too, oh, I commented one time that I earn the right now to just DM them and ask them for their time. Like that again, that's not how this goes. So the frequency is important. So
Mm.
so keep that in mind. But yeah, commenting's big. The other thing is conversation. So that's number 4. Being able to have conversations with people in the DMs and spark a conversation in an authentic way. Same thing that you do when you're cold calling, right? You have to talk to somebody like you just met them. Don't use a script, observe something from the profile, start there. And the last part is conversion. And conversion is where you're doing some things outside of LinkedIn, like the cold email follow-ups, the cold calling, because this all works together. You can't just do one of these things today.
And you know what, if you start some sort of engagement in LinkedIn and you call the prospect and they answer the phone, again, they're more likely to recognize you. If you send them that email, they're more likely to recognize you. So putting it all together and having a multi-channel approach at some point is a really strong way to build on top of any initial engagement to then get to that conversion. I do have one more question for you on the conversion, which is one of the things I think that is super cringy is how people force a hook from like what we were talking about to their ask,
Mm-hmm.
especially in DMs. I've seen this happen a few times to myself, and I've done it until I learned after a while how to do it a little bit better. But how would you advise people to make the transition from we're having a conversation to now I'm making the ask? Would you be curious to learn more about this or get into what you were saying, some of the pre-qualifying questions to make sure this is worth your time?
Okay, well, you definitely don't want to just sit there in the friend zone in the DMs. Let's start there. I personally don't have a lot of time. I don't. And most people don't either. So I'm like, nothing bothers me more than this, like, how's your cat? I have a cat too. Like, we're not doing that. You have to be intentional with the outreach. It is still business outreach. I like to just say, just curious. Are you guys using LinkedIn as part of your strategy right now? I looked at your sales reps' profiles. I don't see any content, and I didn't even see them commenting on their prospects' posts. What's going on with that?
Hmm.
We're keeping it
That's
around
a
the problem.
strong ask.
Yeah, but you're just curious, you know? Do your damn research. Like that's the other thing. Like I work with a lot of clients. They just need to look at the company and the team. You know, one of the guys I work with is in GRC. I'm like, okay, go look at the team size of the company you're reaching out to. Message them, be like, hey, just curious. You know, I did go down the rabbit hole a bit on your company when we connected. I saw you have a pretty small team. How are you guys doing with keeping up with everything with your compliance needs? It's just you are going for the kill, but you're doing it in a different way. It's and you're not requesting a meeting because that's the problem. It's the problem isn't asking somebody about the business side of things. The problem is just asking someone for a meeting and then triggering this flight or fight in them because they don't want to be on the phone with you for 30 minutes.
So good. So good. Just get to the question. It's a business
Mhm.
platform already. Do it conversationally, casually, but make sure that it's not just personal questions about their cat or like
Yeah.
what did someone ask me the other day? He was like, "Oh, how's it living in San Diego? Are you surfing?" And I'm like, "Where's this going? Like, I don't want to talk to a complete stranger about, and nor do I have the time to get into all this stuff."
Well,
Um,
but here's the thing, if you posted about surfing, it would be good for him to
that
be like,
makes more
oh man,
sense.
I just saw your surfing pic. Love
Yeah.
surfing. You know, it had me go further down on your profile a bit. Saw you were in blah, blah, blah. Just curious. So that you can say, I like your cat. Then I saw the cat and then I did this, right? Like there's a way to do it, but it's not just about the surfing and the cats.
It's got to be relevant to what they said. And then
Yeah.
you, I love that transition though. Oh, that had me go into your profile and I saw you do X. Does that mean that, just curious, how are you handling like the GRC? How are you handling your compliance needs? Awesome
Yeah.
transition from like, saw
Yeah.
your cat post.
Yeah. I
um,
know.
Chelsea, I want to make sure we have time for, we have one question in the Q&A, but if anyone else has any others, feel free to drop them in now. Steve Brody asked you a question. My prospect is the CEO or founder of a private mid-market firm. They have
Okay.
a LinkedIn profile, but often are not the most active. They may delegate that to their VP sales, etc. How do you deal with that?
Well, that's the truth. Most of these CEOs are not active. You have to go after the influencers on the decision. You guys cannot keep going after the CEOs and CMOs. It's just not going to happen. So, can you go to a CRO? Can you go to I don't know what you're selling, like VP of sales? Can you potentially look at people in marketing? There's a lot of people that are junior that influence that person. You have to connect with them. And also, you could still comment on any of their posts. They might not check their DMs. They might have like a VA checking their DMs. But if they're trying to do thought leadership and they're trying to get a brand out there, if you comment on their post, they'll appreciate that because it's a rough go in the beginning, no matter how awesome of a CEO you are of a multi-million-dollar company. And comment on the business pages. That's a opportunity that's missed often as well.
Can you double click into the commenting on the business page? Do you mean like if Acme Corporation posts something to comment on their post?
Yeah, on the business page. So, you know, like if my client is Aloha Group, I will go and comment on all of Aloha Group's business posts.
Oh,
Like that,
interesting.
yeah, you want to do it so then the people managing that account will see you constantly in there.
That makes sense. One of the other things that I think is really interesting around like activity, you also just don't know who's a lurker. Some people won't ever engage, but they do log in. There's no way to know that. However, this is also a similar strategy for cold call list building and cold email. Validated channels is another approach that I've tried myself where you can outsource this pretty low cost. But if I have a list of 1,000 prospects, I want to know who in this list has been active on LinkedIn at least in the last 30 days, maybe weekly. And I can have someone go through the profiles and check their activity for that. I
Yeah.
can also do the same for cold calling. I can see who answers the phone if I call them and is it the right person. That's a lot more difficult. But we have one last question here, and then we'll have to wrap it up. For this one's from Paul. Do you try to keep your comments, posts relevant to your industry and pain points, or is it okay to talk about whatever? I've seen some people complain about LinkedIn turning into Facebook 2.0 and maybe TikTok recently, and don't want to be that guy. Oh, I think this is a good one. Thanks, Paul, for that question. Chelsea, what are your thoughts?
I think Paul needs to put on his dancing shoes because TikTok is getting banned. Now, listen, I can't even. All right, how many clients? I signed like 3 clients this week, and most of them referenced a video I did on an elf. So I'm sorry, but people sell to people. This is a personal brand. It is kind of like Facebook. And yes, 100%. Comment on big creators, comment on people outside of your industry, comment on things that interest you, comment on everything you can, because you're just building a network and you are so much more than this one business, this one thing you're selling today. You have a whole life in front of you. You have so many opportunities you don't even know exist until you get on LinkedIn and you just start putting yourself, your authentic self, out there. So comment on anything and everything. Also, if you create content, like, and it's a weird thing you have in your mind, just post it. You don't know. Like, people love to just interact with other people and give their brain a break. Like, that is the big thing.
Chelsea Olsen, thank you so much for joining Unblocked. Final message. What's one thing you want everyone to walk away knowing?
That LinkedIn is really powerful and they should spend some time engaging on posts, reading people's posts, absorbing how people are using LinkedIn today. Just spend some time on there and check out my profile too, because you could see what I did. I mean, I'm no different than you. I'm just another person. So mimic what I do.